All right, I think we're ready to get going here. Sorry about that, little issue. All right, so we are now talking about symbolic interactionism. And we started on it the other day. I'm not going to review everything I talked about the other day, but the basic idea that we're trying to get across is the social construction of gender and race. We started what we know about symbolic interactionism so far from this class is that it focuses on face-to-face interaction between people, and focuses on what we talked about as the social construction of reality, this idea that we kind of create our reality through our social interaction. A key idea there is that gender and race are like masks or performances. So just like actors on a stage, remember we said about symbolic interactionism that it sees social life as being like a play. And so when people are interacting, they're in a way playing a part or playing a role. And the idea here is similar to actors on a stage. If you've ever seen a play or a movie, you understand that the people playing the parts aren't really those parts, they're pretending to be those parts. But in social life, what symbolic interactionism says is that we're also, in real life, playing parts. And that something like race and gender, which if you're not a symbolic interactionist, we think of race and gender as biological things that are just built into us, that we're just born with our race and born with the gender. But we tried to show the other day by talking about the difference between sex and gender, that they're not the same thing, at least from a sociological standpoint. Sex is something you're born with. It's whether you're male or female. But as we said, gender, in sociology anyway, is more about masculinity and femininity. And we said about sex that, sex is a fixed thing. It's biological. It's based on, our genes. It's fixed. You can't really change it. I mean, you can change your sex now with surgery and all of that and transition. But even there, you're one or the other. You don't get to go back and forth. You're either male or female. But with gender, it's much more of a continuous thing. I would put this, so sex is male or female. Masculinity and femininity it's a continuum. You can be extremely feminine or extremely masculine. And you could be anywhere in between. You could be androgynous, both masculine and feminine. And with this one, it's not a fixed thing. All of us can move around on this spectrum, on this continuum. We can act in very masculine ways, we can act in very feminine ways. And it's almost a separate thing from whether we have a penis or a vagina. So as I mentioned, I get frustrated with today's discussions in our society about people saying, what's my gender identity? And here I disagree with psychology. Everybody's got a fluid gender identity is what I'm saying here. We can change all the time how we identify. I can feel very feminine in the morning, very masculine in the afternoon, and go back to feminine again. It's not a question of who you are. It's a question of what society calls feminine or masculine. It's a cultural thing. And we don't have much say over it as an individual. If I enjoy cooking, I just think it's something I like doing. I love cooking. My culture calls it feminine. You must be gay, or you must be a woman. You must like women, be woman-like if you like cooking. Okay, well, what if I like grilling? If I put on a hat and go outside, then I'm doing a manly thing? Why can't I saute some salmon inside my house? I mean, and so what is considered masculine or feminine isn't up to me. It isn't up to the individual. The culture decides those things. And as we said, the culture is constantly shifting. It's variable what society considers masculine or feminine at any moment. And you as the individual don't have much say over it. And so we can see it as kind of like a costume or a mask. You have this real self, your penis or your vagina, but we have to go out in the world and perform. We have to, interact with people. And so we have to make up our mind as a person, what kind of gender strategy do we want to have? I didn't use this term the other day. But all of us have to kind of figure out, how do I want to present myself? If I have a penis, am I going to present myself as a manly man and wear like thick shoes and a thick belt? That's what I'm doing lately. Maybe as I got older, I mean, this is funny to mention. When I was a young man, I didn't feel the need to present myself in extremely masculine ways. In fact, I had dreadlocks in college. I probably should show you my college picture because it kind of gets at what I'm trying to talk about. In college, I was, in real life, I was a white male from suburbia in California. But in college, I grew my hair out as dreadlocks. And so people said, well, are you black? Are you white? You have long hair. Are you female? Are you male? And as a college student, I liked, kind of messing with those boundaries and letting, people got mad at me in college. White people drove by me in a Camaro, white people that didn't go to the college, and yelled at me, "You're white!" And I was like, oh, really? And but then there was a black student newspaper at the school, and somebody wrote an editorial in the newspaper saying, what's up with these white people with dreadlocks? Why are you stealing our culture? So like, just having the hair that naturally came to me, I didn't do anything to have dreadlocks. I just let my hair grow naturally. But the culture wants white people to be a certain way. So if you're white, you're not supposed to have dreadlocks. If you're male, you're not supposed to have long hair. And so people try to police you. There's a term called gender policing. People try to keep you in your box and say, well, if you're a male with a penis, you're supposed to wear pants. You're supposed to dress this way. You're supposed to like this kind of stuff. And if you're a female with boobs, you're supposed to dress this way and like this kind of stuff. And people, especially kids, get bullied a lot. Hey, you're being gay, you're being fag, you're being a wussy, you're being a wimp. I mean, boys get it much more than women do, probably. But women get a lot of policing too if you do too many things that are considered masculine. And so we have to come up with a strategy as we go out in the world. How am I going to present myself? If I, for example, am a large-boned female, can I play the part of a girly girl? Or do I have to present myself as a female in a different, tough, broad kind of female way? I mean, if you think of the characters that we think of with women, there's the girly girl type, there's the tough, gal type. There's all kinds of types of people, but are they just personalities? I mean, when I asked you at the beginning of the class, who are you? People say, well, I'm introverted. Some people say. And I go, well, are you really introverted? Is that your personality, or is that the part you're playing in this social drama where, for example, dark-skinned women, brown-skinned women are not supposed to be the loud ones. The loud ones are supposed to be the white males. They're the ones in charge with the power. They get to talk. And I'm a dark-skinned female. I should sit in the back and be quiet. Is that really your personality, or is that in this context, on this stage, that's the part you find yourself being cast as? On the other hand, if you're with your friends and they're all Latina females, are you quiet then? Or is that a whole different play that you're part of then, where you're playing a different part and a different character? And now I'm the sassy one and the loud one. But at class, when I was with all those other white people and males, I was the quiet one. So who are you really, or are you playing a part? I don't know if this is ringing true to you, but what I'm trying to get at is that we have to kind of shift our performance, how we perform our gender, given in whatever stage we're on. If you're with, and who your audience is. If your audience is your other friends and your other females, you might play your part as a female in a different way than when your audience is strangers and males and people of different worlds than yours. And so we're constantly changing our performance to fit our audience, or fit the stage that we happen to be on, according to this perspective. And race is a big part of it. So race, too, is a socially constructed idea that and I'm going to have to make this point stronger to you. I can't just do it as quickly as I did with sex and gender. But our gender performance, our gender strategy is affected by other identities that we have. So when I asked you, who are you sociologically? You have a gender, yeah, you have race. But how does your gender and race intersect with each other? The concept I'm getting at here is intersectionality. Race and gender intersect with each other and with other social identities or categories. So yes, if I'm a male, I have to figure out how I'm going to play my part as a male. I have a penis, I have body hair, everyone knows I have a male body. But how will I play that part in society? Will I play it as a tough guy, big and strong and silent type? Will I play it as a quiet, friendly, nice guy? Will I play it as a, hey, yo, what's up? I don't really care about much stuff. Or will I play it as a, I'm a very serious person? I mean, how do I play it? Well, my strategy might get affected by my race. If I'm a black male, I may need to think of that. How are my audience going to receive my performance if I'm black versus if I'm white, versus if I'm Latino, versus if I'm Asian? My performance will be affected by other performances too, because people have seen movies and TV shows. If you're a Latino woman, for example, people have seen Jennifer Lopez, and they've seen Christina Aguilera, and they've seen other Latino women, and so they want to know, are you like them or not? And you may borrow things from their performances, or you may not. But as having a gender, you also have a race ethnicity identity that people are seeing you through. And so your strategy has to, it's like a costume. Like, I have that costume on, so how can I play the part? I have this race costume, I have this gender costume, so how should I play my part? It also intersects with other categories, how you play your part as a female or as a male. What other categories? Well, things like your body type. If you're small and thin-boned, you may play your gender part in a different way than if you're large and big-boned. If you are disabled or not, disability status. I'll call it disability/ability status. That's going to affect the kind of gender performance you can have. If I think of like Donald Trump, he plays a big, tough, white bully guy. He loves to make fun of other people, talk about how great he is, how much losers other people are. He was shown on film making fun of retarded, somebody who had a disability. And I shouldn't even say the word retarded, but he used the word retarded and he went like that to make fun of this person. Would a disabled person make fun of disabled people that way? Could you play the part of, could you be a Donald Trump type male if you yourself have a disability? We had another president named Roosevelt. He was in a wheelchair practically. He didn't come off as a big, tough, angry guy. Anyway, or take Obama. I mean, if you're trying to play your part as a male president and you have black skin, can you go around talking crap about everybody? But if you're white and you're large-bodied, then maybe you can play the part like Trump and get away with it. But if Trump, so that's the point about performance is, can you get away with it? In other words, will the audience accept it? And a lot of us make our choices thinking, well, the audience won't accept me if I do this. If I'm a small, bone, disabled, dark-skinned person, can I go around talking shit at everybody, telling them they're all losers? I don't know. People might not buy that from me and say, well, you were just laughing at it. But some other guy, if he's got this costume, a big white hair, blonde hair, angry guy, he can get away with that performance. But, and so it's a lot like acting. A lot of us think we don't know how to act. Oh, I don't want to go on stage. But what I notice is everybody all the time has to do things that actors have to do. They have to make choices about how to say what they're saying, how to hold their bodies, based on what they think the audience will believe or not. I mean, every time you do your job, if you're a waitress, for example, hi, I'm Cindy, welcome to Applebee's. It's a script you're following, and you're making choices about how to present yourself as a waitress based on your body type, your race, your gender. And so I'm sure what, the professor's the same thing. Literally, I'm on the stage having to perform the part of professor. But you do it too, I'm sure, in various, right now you're playing a part of student. And if you were to play the part unconvincingly, it might not work out for you. So you're trying hard to play the part well as a student. But somebody, for example, who had, let's say, a disability that makes them go like this all the time, people might go, you're not playing the part of student well. You're supposed to sit quietly and still while the professor talks, So anyway, so people, sometimes people choose not to go on a stage because they feel like I won't be able to play the part right. I can't go to that classroom or to that workplace or to that restaurant or to that bar because people won't accept my performance there. The audience is expecting, I think, for example, you go to some restaurants and you never see a non-white person there. You're like, do non-white people not like this food, or why don't they come here? And I sometimes think because certain social environments are not comfortable for people. They can't, the part they would have to play in there is I'm a little shy, dark-skinned person. So that's how, if I'm going to be myself in this place, people will look at me funny. So anyway, so I don't know if this is getting across here, but it's this idea that gender is a lot like performance. Sex, you don't have a choice over, you're male or female, but how you play your gender, how you come off as a girly girl or a tough guy or a quiet guy or a thoughtful girl or a sporty girl, how you play your part is affected by other things like your race. They intersect. And so that's the key idea, is their intersectionality. Another key idea here was gender and race are like performances, and they affect each other. We've already made the point that gender is a social construction. The way we made that point was to say, I didn't finish the point, but we talked about that variability, that gender varies. It varies historically. It varies culturally. Cultural variability and individual variability. If sex doesn't vary, sex is biological. Penises are the same now as they've always been. Vaginas are pretty much the same as they've always been. But what does change is what's considered masculine and feminine. As we talked about, America has changed what it considers masculine or feminine, like blue jeans is one example. It used to be only masculine. Now women can wear them and it's acceptable and you get away with it. And you can perform your gender femininity while wearing blue jeans. We also talked about cultural variability. Different cultures disagree on what's masculine or feminine. And they're changing too, over time. And then even within one culture at one particular time, individuals vary greatly in how they present themselves in terms of their gender. Somebody could be very girly girl, somebody could be very tough girl, or they could be very dressed like a man and present themselves as a man. And so gender is variable, and all of this shows what we meant by gender is socially constructed. The fact that it changes, depending on the context, depending on the time period, depending on the culture, shows us that it's not something that just comes from nature or God. It's something we humans are creating and recreating and changing. Race is harder, I think, for me to make that point. You probably say, well, no, race is just something you're born with. It's not constructed. But sociologists argue very strenuously that race, like gender, is in a lot of ways, yes, there's a biological component to it, but there's a big cultural component to it as well. And really that whole idea of structure versus culture is good to keep in mind. Your body has a structure. You have either a penis or a vagina. You either have a lot of body hair or you don't and stuff. That's the structure, the who has what. But what So this is sex. But culture is gender. Culture is what we think and feel about people's body types and things like that, and the meanings we attach to those different body types. Race, too, I don't have a good term for it, but we have racial characteristics, racial traits. You have your DNA. But what does it mean? What does it mean to have dark skin or light skin or curly hair or straight hair or round eyes or narrower eyes? The meanings of those bodily differences, that's what we mean by race. That's what we mean by, racial identity. And so where do those things come from? When we say they're socially constructed, so we're trying to make the point here, and we're going to make it more strongly in a second, that race, like gender, is a set of meanings and a set of ideas more than a set of physical characteristics. And it's a lot like a performance. You have certain physical characteristics you're born with, like maybe you have darker skin than some other people. Maybe you have kinkier hair than other people. But how you play that part is a question of, racial meaning. So what are we getting at here? Well, both race and gender have some similar sources of how they're constructed. So when we say something socially constructed, what do we mean? Social construction, what does that mean? Well, language is a big part of it. What we think things mean, or what we think is true or not, when we say things, the social construction of reality, language is a big part of it. Laws are another place where people's realities get constructed. Just to give an example, at one time in this country, if you had black skin, if you were called black, you couldn't ride certain buses, you couldn't drink at certain water fountains, you had to be a slave. Nowadays, that's not true. So is being black the same now as being black was back then? And who decided this idea, so where did this idea of blackness as a separate thing even come from? Is what we're getting at. So language, laws, media and culture, media and entertainment. These are all sources of where our ideas about what is gender, what is masculine and feminine, what's okay or not okay for people with penises and vaginas to do. But it's also true when we talk about race. Where do our ideas of blackness and whiteness and brownness, or whatever we want to call these terms, where do they come from? Who decides? Who made them up? And so that I'm trying to show you the commonality of race and gender as social constructions, but let's get more specific about it. Why do we say that race is a socially constructed idea? We say, first of all, that race, so social construction of race is what I'm talking about now, focusing on that, but I'm gonna always keep gender in mind because, as we've said, it's intersectional. You can't really think about race without also kind of thinking about gender and class, I would argue, and several other intersections. Social construction of race. Race, let's start with the idea, race is a pseudo-scientific concept. What does pseudo-scientific mean? P-S-E-U-D-O, scientific. Anybody know what the word pseudo-scientific means? You ever heard that? Pseudo-scientific? It means fake science. Pseudo means fake. It's fake science. Can you think of any other examples of fake science, things that people say are scientific, or they treat it as if it was scientific, but it really isn't, and a real scientist would laugh at you? Are there any ologies you can think of, ologies that people say they're into? Like science is supposed to be like ology, like sociology, biology, psychology. So sometimes just putting ology at the end of something makes it sound like it's a science, But it really isn't. Are there any ologies you know of that aren't real sciences? What about like astrology? You know what astrology is? Astrology is the question of whether you're Aquarius or Pisces or Aries or Cancer. You know, you get your horoscope and all that stuff. It's called astrology, and some people believe in it, that it's true, but real scientists will say it's not science. It doesn't meet the definition, the qualifications of science. We'll talk more about what science really is later. And sociology, some people question whether it's a real science, but the concept of race is presented as if it were science, and we'll talk about when that was developed and why. But there was a certain point in history when the idea of the race concept was developed, and it was developed by quote unquote scientists. But today's scientists, real scientists, will tell you there is no such thing as race scientifically. If you were to look at somebody's genome, at their DNA, can you tell what race somebody is from their DNA? And the scientists will tell you, no, you cannot, because there is no clear definition of what a race is. There's people from Africa that have certain traits, and their ancestors are from Africa. There's people from Asia, there's people from Europe, and they have certain traits, but where does one group stop and another one begin? You can't tell it at the level of DNA. We feel like we can tell when we look at somebody what they are, but oftentimes we're wrong. Oh, that person looks black. Well, they're not. That person looks white. Well, they're not. Obama is a perfect example. We called him the first black president, but his mom is white. His dad was black. At a genetic level, he has equal number of genes from Europe and Africa. And so if you're trying to figure out which one is he, at a scientific level, scientists use evidence and objective evidence. At the objective level, he has an equal number of quote unquote white genes and quote unquote black genes. So at an objective level, you can't decide. He's both. He's a person with both white and black genes, equal number. What do we call him? In our everyday life, we call him a black president. He's black, not white. Why not? He could just as easily be called white as he could be called black. But in our culture, in our custom, in our media, somebody with kinky hair, so it's his hair, his skin is pretty light. Obama. I know people with darker skin than Obama that aren't called black because they don't have other traits. So what are the traits? What traits do you need to have? If you have that thing we call a fro, an afro, then we say, well, they're a black person. But if you had the same skin color with straight hair, we might say, no, he looks Latino, or he might look Asian, or what is he? The fact that we call him a black president is a choice we make as a society, but scientifically, at the level of genes, he's both. And there isn't any way to decide scientifically whether somebody whose dad is black and mom is white, which one they are. They're both. But there it comes back to, there was an old law in America that used to say, if you have any black blood, then you are black and you don't have the same rights as a white person. So the law used to be, if you have some black blood in you, then you're just considered black and you don't get to be part of the white race and you don't get to have the rights that white people have. So based on that old law, we still seem to have this idea that if somebody has any non-whiteness in them, then they're not white. When in fact, most white people have some non-whiteness in them, and lots of non-white people have some whiteness in them. And so really the reality, the fact, the scientific reality is there's a lot of much more mixing of genes on planet Earth than our concept of race would admit. And in fact, people who are white, there's been a lot of migration over time. So people that we say were from Africa, they were originally from Asia possibly, or people that are from Europe were originally from Africa. I mean, so when you're trying to figure out who's from where and what genes they have, what we actually call the people is more of a cultural thing, a social thing, than a scientific thing. At the scientific level, at the genome level, you can't tell what race somebody is. If you were looking at Obama's race, Obama's genome, you might be able to see what traits he has. So biologists can say, okay, this person looks like they have a little bit darker skin than a typical European. It looks like they have curlier hair than a typical straight-haired European. They can find these traits, but how many traits is enough to say black person? There isn't an objective measure. We have to then see the person in real life and then decide based on a host of things what we call that person. And so race isn't a scientific thing, it's a cultural thing, and most scientists say it's not a useful concept. We have genetic markers we look for, and those are useful for comparing people, but we find these markers all over Europe and all over Africa and stuff like that. And so trying to figure out what single race a person's from isn't even meaningful. There is the human race, and the human race has lots of different genes in it. But which category you put somebody in is more of a question of, what box we're going to put somebody in. Just like we say, if you have a penis, we're going to put you in the male, in the masculine box. But people don't always feel they fit in the masculine box. And so I don't have a good term for it, but I do think that there's sort of race characteristics and then race identity. And it's a lot like this thing of sex versus gender. Yeah, we have certain things like our skin color, our hair type, our facial bone structure and things like that. But how we present ourselves, how we go around being in the world is a totally different thing. If you raise somebody with genes of a black person in a totally white family, in a totally white neighborhood, in a totally white schools, they're gonna come off in a lot of ways as much more like the white people you know than the black people you know. Because it has a lot more to do with your experiences and your culture and the things, the meanings you attach to things than it does with your quote unquote genes. And so how has race been constructed? If it's not a real thing, language is one key place. Language, the linguistic construction of reality. And symbolic interactionism as a field has been heavily influenced by the field of linguistics, because language, the study of language, has come to, I would say, infect or affect a lot of different fields. If you're taking other fields like history and you're taking other classes, they might also pay a lot of attention to language. The words that we use to describe things in a lot of ways become the reality. I guess the key idea here I want to get at is the idea of binary oppositions. Words get their meanings from other words. Language is a self-referential system. In other words, the only way we know what a word means is to use other words. Like if you ask somebody what is tree, they'll have to use other words in English to tell you what the word tree means. So you can only use words to describe words. And in that sense, words only get their meaning from other words. It doesn't sound like that important of a point, but the point here is that words they don't get their meaning from the real world. We have a real world out there with trees and things, or things with leaves on them and green things growing. But what are those things? If I call them grass and trees, I'm using language to describe those things. But language is a different reality than the real reality. And language becomes its own reality. Language has its own logic. A language system has its own logic. So what am I getting at here? Well, for example, one way that words get their meanings is from other words, the opposite words. We only know what the word adult means by what? How do you know what adult means? Well, adult means not child. What does child mean? It means not adult. They're binary oppositions, meaning you can't have one meaning, the one can't mean anything unless it has the other one. The opposite. Male can't mean anything without female. White can't mean anything without black. Black can't mean anything without white. Smart doesn't mean anything without dumb. Strong doesn't mean anything without weak. Weak doesn't mean anything without strong. The words give each other meaning, and you need both. You need the pair for the word to make any sense. So words give each other meaning, and binary oppositions are really important. We kind of learned about them when we talked about Durkheim. In order for cultures to know who they were, they had to have a them. We are us and they are them. This is sacred, that's profane. This binary opposition, sacred, profane, us and them. That's how culture works. For something to mean something, you have to know what does it not mean? What's the opposite of it? But the fact that language needs opposites, because the system of it, the system of language needs these opposites, that's different from the real world. The real world's more messy and interesting than that. But if I say that somebody's, and the thing about language is, there tends to be positive parts of the binary and negative parts. So a child is a non-adult, a female is a non-male. But the way language works too is the positives line up with each other. So when you say the word white, for example, you're connecting whiteness with maleness, with adult, with smart, with strong. When you say the word black, you're connecting it with other negative signifiers in the language, other negative sides of the binary. Black, female, child, dumb, weak. Our language itself sets up whiteness as positive. Whiteness is a good thing. Blackness is a negative, a bad thing. Whenever we say white in English, it means something positive. I can see I'm boring you, but this is important because this is when we talked about implicit bias. Some people, there's been a lot of talk about, are we racist even though we don't think we are? Are people sometimes unconsciously racist, unconsciously thinking negative things about other races? And at the level of language, we can, because the language itself is kind of racist. If you use the word black to refer to a person, you're in the language connecting them with other weak, bad, negative things. Same with if you call somebody a female. If you call somebody a male or you call them white. Now, in reality, like I said, this linguistic reality doesn't match real reality. First of all, we call people white and black. That's not even accurate. People my whole life said, "You're so white, Mark, you're so white." I guess I'm very white. Well, am I the color of this thing? No, this is white. And I would submit to you, there's no person on planet Earth who's ever been the color of this board. If you ask your child to use crayons to color a white person, do they grab the white crayon? If you color a person with a white crayon, do they look like a white person? No, they look like a ghost. So you wouldn't use white, you'd use peach or pink or something like that to make a white person. By the same token, this thing's black. This color is black. Are there any black people on Earth that are this color? No. There's brown people, there's dark brown people, there's light brown people, there's nobody who's black. And there's nobody who's white. And yet we use these terms. We say, oh, there's a white guy, he's not white at all. There's a black guy, he's not black at all. But when we use those words, we're setting them up as if they were opposite people. They're opposites. White is good, black is bad. And we're connecting that white person with all kinds of good, positive things in our subconscious mind. And we're connecting that black person with all kinds of negative things in our subconscious mind. And so language constructs reality. It doesn't just reflect reality, is the idea here. Language helps create reality. It helps construct it. So what we think is real or not isn't a matter of objective reality out there. So how do I know? So what am I getting at? Well, for example, in our culture, we often seem to think white and black people are opposites. Can you think of examples where we treat them as if they're opposites? Like we say, white people can't jump. There was a whole movie named that, White Men Can't Jump. And I guess the implication is black men can't jump. Well, I know a lot of black guys that can't jump at all. And I know a lot of white guys that have a really high, in fact, the guy that just won the dunk contest in the NBA was this short white dude that can jump really high and dunk really well. So, but this idea that black people can jump and white people can't. This idea of black people have rhythm and white people don't, well, that's just total BS. There's plenty of black people that don't have good rhythm and aren't good dancers. And there's plenty of white people that do have rhythm and are good dancers. But in our culture, we've constructed a reality where if you're white, you're not supposed to have rhythm. So you see people at a wedding, and you see the white people sitting down. They won't get up. And they're tapping their foot perfectly to the rhythm. And then there's black people on the dance floor, and they're shaking their booty and maybe not doing very well. But it's like in our culture, we give permission to black people because that's the construction. You're black, you have rhythm, you know how to dance. You're white, you don't have rhythm, you need to sit down and not shake your booty. Are they really opposites, or are we playing a part? I'm a white guy, I'm not supposed to get up and shake my booty. I'm a black guy, I'm supposed to get up and shake my booty. And we do this a lot with, all these other identities too. We create the reality more than reflect it. When you ask Americans, what percentage of America is black? Well, I can ask you that just to see where we are on that. What percentage of America do you think are black Americans? Is it about 90% black and 10% white in America, would you say? Is it about 80% black? 20% white, about 70% black and about 30% white? Is it about 60% black and 40% white? Is it about 50% black and 50% white? How many say that? Is it about 40% black and 60% white? Is it about 30% black and 70% white? 20% black and 80% white? How many say that? 10% black and 90% white? A lot of you didn't raise your hand at all. Why you don't? Well, what do you think? Do you think black people are a majority or a minority in America? What's the term we use for black people? Do we call them? We call them a minority. So one of the terms minority means, the reason we use that term is because if you took the whole population, that group of people is not the majority. So still in America, white people are the majority. If you're white, you could be happy about that, I guess. But a lot of white people are afraid that they're no longer being the majority. And in California, by the way, California is what's known as a minority state. So we don't have any majority in California. White people are about 49%. I don't know, Latino, something like 35 or something like that. And we had Asians and blacks as well. So nobody in California is more than 50%. If you're more than 50% of the group, then you can say you're in the majority. But black people are not in the majority and never have been in the United States. So how much of a minority are they is what I'm asking you. Do you think they're about 40% of the population, 30%, 20%? Well, when you ask Americans this on polls, what percentage of America is black? A lot of Americans say 50%. Oh, I think it's 50%. And I think that's a reflection of this created reality. We think of black and white as equal halves of something. Half black, half white, just like an Oreo or something like that. But in fact, black people are 13%. Only 1 out of 10 Americans is a black person. But in our minds, they're a much bigger group than we think. Partly that's because of the media. A lot of people think there's a lot more Jews in America too. I'm Jewish. Jews are only like 2%. But there's a lot of Jewish people in the media, in entertainment, and there are a lot of black people in sports and entertainment. Why is that? Are they better because of their genes at sports and entertainment? No. But if you look back at the history of America and our laws, for example, a lot of Jewish people weren't permitted to make money in various industries. One of the industries you could go legally work in if you were Jewish was the entertainment world. So it was an avenue to get some money, but you couldn't go work in banking or other kinds of professions very easily. Black people too, even much more than Jews, were discriminated against and prohibited from, even when they did sports for a long time, they had Negro leagues. Because Negro leagues, black people aren't as good at sports as white people, so we can't have them play with them. Well, we don't really believe that now, do we? But a lot of black kids have set their sights on trying to make it in the sports world because it was one of the few avenues available. And if you don't, and same with entertainment. So black people were permitted to be entertainers, singers, dancers, show people, sports people will let you do that, but we're not going to let you own property. We're not going to let you run businesses and things like that. So if we see a lot of black people in entertainment and sports today, it's because of that legal history that made it so that that was one of the few opportunities. And yeah, if you spend a lot of time playing basketball as a kid, you'll get better at basketball. It's not because of your genes, it's because of your hopes and dreams and your behavior. And so again, we've constructed these realities where black people are better at basketball than white people, or better at music. It's not, that was a field that was open. And so they spent a lot of time trying to get good at it. Whereas if you're a white kid, you have many other things open to you in life besides playing professional sports, and so you get good at those things, science and things like that. But anyway, so language is one place that we construct a reality, and people thinking that there's way more black people than there are is one example of that. People thinking of black and white people as opposites, like dancing or rhythm or sports and other things, is again a reflection of the linguistic reality that sets them up as opposites. But the real reality is we're all human, and we actually have 99% of genes in common. If you look at our actual genetic similarity, 99.9% similar. Yeah, there's a little bit of variation in terms of facial structure and skin color and things like that. But to then say that makes you a totally different human, and you're a different race than me, and therefore I can't share rooms with you, country with you, all of that's a constructed reality. This thing that this other group of people with 99.9% same genes as me, I can't possibly deal with them. I mean, you create a reality. Anyway, so laws were one of the things that helped create this reality. And so let's take a look at that a little bit. We're going to look at a few analyses of race. The first one I want to talk about is called laissez-faire racism. It's by two sociologists named Bobo and Smith. I'm just trying to cite my sources, and these aren't my ideas. These come from Bobo and Smith. But if we review their concept of laissez-faire racism, I think we'll learn a lot about what it means to say that race is a socially constructed idea more than a biological one. So what does laissez-faire mean? Laissez-faire means kind of free market. In French, laissez-faire means let it be or hands off. And if you're a laissez-faire capitalist, or that's what our country likes to say, that we're a laissez-faire economy in America, meaning our government is supposed to take a hands-off approach to our economy. We're supposed to have a free market, meaning the government isn't supposed to run our economy. And this idea of laissez-faire racism is trying to say that America, in promoting our free market economy, has also promoted a certain kind of racism that we're seeing today. And if you want to understand race relations in America today, according to this viewpoint, you have to understand this other ideology, the capitalist free market ideology. So that's what we're trying to get at here. Let's start with the question that Bobo and Smith asked, which is, are Americans racist? And their answer is kind of that it depends. If you compare the 1960s to the 2000s, you see something interesting happen, which is that you can compare what they call race attitudes with race policies, people's support for race policies. What are we getting at here? So we're comparing two periods in America, and we're asking, have Americans become more racist or less racist than they used to be? And first of all, I would make a distinction to help us understand what we're talking about here. Prejudice is not the same as racism. Prejudice is how you personally feel about other people of different races. It's a personal feeling. It's what I'm talking about here with race attitudes. How do you feel about other people? Like, would you marry somebody of another race? Would you let your child marry somebody of another race? How would you feel if people of another race moved next door to you? Those are personal feelings about another group of people that sociologists, we call that prejudice. But racism is a different thing, really. Racism has to do with the whole society. Is the society unequal or not? On the basis of race. For example, do white people have certain privileges and opportunities than non-white people? If that's a consistent fact about the society, then you could say, well, it's a racist society. Whether or not the people are prejudiced, if the white people have rights and things that the non-white people don't, then it's an unequal society in terms of race. And so when we say racist, we mean the structure of society. And when we talk about prejudice, we're talking about people's personal feelings. And we can, as sociologists, make a distinction. We could say, well, America might be very racially equal, where people have the same opportunities, same everything, but people themselves are prejudiced, like they don't like each other. Or we could have a society where people like each other and they're fine with each other, but in fact, there's inequality on the basis of race. So race policies are efforts by the government to try and make the races more equal. When we talk about race policies, there have been times when the government wasn't laissez-faire. If you're laissez-faire about race, you'd say, well, the government shouldn't do anything about race. It should just let people be themselves. But there's been times in American history where we've said, no, the government does need to step in. A good example is desegregation. For example, the South used to have Jim Crow laws saying that black people had to use certain water fountains, certain buses, and things like that. And the federal government passed a law saying you're not allowed to do that. And so the federal government sent armed troops down to Alabama and other places to say, you guys have to desegregate your buses and your schools especially. And they said, no, we're not going to do that. But that kind of thing, should the federal government force the South to desegregate its schools? That's a race policy question. Do you want black people living next door to you? That's a race attitude question. And these questions are the kind of questions sociologists ask on surveys. So when we compare 1960s to 2000s, what we can compare is survey data where Americans were asked all kinds of questions about their views on race and their views on race policies. In the 1960s, people were pretty prejudiced. Americans were. If you ask them things like, would you allow your daughter to marry a person of the other race? A lot of people back then would have said, I don't know, I don't think that's going to work out for them. That's not a good idea. How would you feel about another race moving next door to you? Well, I don't know, I kind of like having people my same race in my neighborhood. Maybe those people should live in their neighborhood and I'll live in my neighborhood. So people back then in the 60s, when you asked them these kinds of race attitude questions, they were pretty prejudiced. They didn't know that they liked people from other groups. Their personal feelings were pretty negative towards them. But when you asked about racial policies, should the US government send federal troops down to Alabama to force the Alabama governor to let black kids into the schools down there? That was a question people were asked in the 1960s, early and late 50s. And a lot of Americans said, yes, they should. They were in favor. They were in favor of government efforts to create racial equality, in favor of racial equality. So they might have been prejudiced, but they weren't in favor of a racist society. In other words, they didn't want to live in a society where white people had all these rights and privileges and black people didn't. And so Americans were asked, how do you feel about black people? I don't know if I like them, but should they have the same rights? Yes. Nowadays, in the 2000s, if you ask people these kinds of questions, you find on race attitudes, people are pretty tolerant. If you ask people questions today on surveys like, would you allow your daughter to marry somebody of another race? A lot of Americans will say, well, if he's a nice guy, if he treats her well, if he's got a job, then yeah, that's fine. How would you feel about people of another race moving next door? Well, as long as they keep their yard nice and, pay their rent or, pay their mortgage, that's fine. I don't want my property values going down, but as long as they keep a nice property, then that's fine. So in today's world, people don't say they're prejudiced or they don't like people of another race or don't want to be near them. But when you ask Americans, should we have racial equality? So for example, another race equality, race policy is affirmative action. Well, another one that might relate more to you is dreamers. Should we allow like the children of illegal immigrants to go to college? And a lot of Americans say, no, I'm against that. Whereas a lot of Americans would say, well, that means you're saying, I'm okay with inequality. Or affirmative action, if you don't know what that is, that's a policy that many colleges have had and employers saying, well, we had racism in America. For 400 years, black people were slaves and they weren't allowed to learn how to read and weren't allowed to go to college and things like that. So now that they do have those rights, we're going to take positive steps to make sure that they can get into college and get into jobs. So some people call this racial quotas. They say, are you just letting in people just because of their race, even though they're not qualified? And a lot of, and affirmative action isn't supposed to do that. Affirmative action is supposed to be based on, if you have 2 qualified applicants and they're totally qualified, but you only have 1 spot. So this is what affirmative action says. If you're University of California, Berkeley, for example, if you have an affirmative action policy, you say, well, we only have 1 spot and we have 2 applicants. 1 applicant's white, 1's black, but they have the same SAT scores, same grades. I mean, everything about them is the same, so they both could get in. But we only can allow 1 in because we only have a spot for 1. If that's the case, we should give the spot to the black person because of past discrimination, past racism. And white people have already had a head start. So if we're going to make things equal racially, we've got to let in the black person. And many Americans are strongly opposed to affirmative action. And they say, well, that's just reverse racism. You're just letting in people because of their race. And I didn't get in because of my race. And so people have sued, colleges like Berkeley, and there have been a lot of court cases over whether we should allow affirmative action. And a lot of Americans are opposed to it. So people are pretty opposed nowadays to government efforts, to policies of racial equality, to race policies, I'll call them. And so this is a curious thing that's happened, according to Bobo and Smith. We used to be a country that didn't like each other very much. Different races didn't want to mix with each other. But we wanted equality as a country. We didn't want racism. We were prejudiced, but we didn't want racism. We didn't want racial inequality, but we were okay with having, hateful attitudes towards each other. Nowadays, we say we don't have hateful attitudes towards each other, and yet we're willing to accept a racist society. In other words, America is unequal. White people really do have more wealth and more opportunities and more power than non-white people. And if you as an American say, well, I don't think the government should do anything about that. I think we should just keep things how they are. Then you're basically saying, I'm okay with an America where white people are up here and have all the wealth, there are a lot of it, and the black people and the brown people are down here. So there's a difference between being prejudiced and accepting a racist society. But if you say, I don't think the government should do anything about our racist society, well, you're basically taking a kind of free market approach. You're kind of saying, let things be how they are. Don't have the government try to get in there and change things. Just let it be. And Bobo and Smith wonder, why have Americans adopted this ideology? It's an ideology. It's the dominant racial ideology today. If you ask, people in power, like Biden, like Trump wants to be in power? Should we have special policies to make America more equal racially? Both of them will probably say, no, we shouldn't. That would be, too much of an intervention by the government. We need to just have a hands-off approach. And so Bobo and Smith say, but why have Americans changed their views on this? 40 years ago, 50 years ago, we were in favor of this. But now we say we're not. So what changed? Why has the racial ideology changed in America? And what do we mean by a dominant racial ideology? Who creates racial ideologies and why? And where do they come from and what do they do? But once we say to understand that, you have to go back into our history and understand that America's always had a certain dominant racial ideology. But the one right now is called laissez-faire racism. But it wasn't always that. So we've always had a dominant racial ideology. But we've always also had underlying economic and social realities. So this is the model that informs their article. What is a dominant racial ideology? It's a belief system created by elites. Who are elites? They're the people with power. How do you create a belief system? Well, you have to have the access to things like printing press. I mean, if you can print books and newspapers, if you can make movies and TV shows, if you're in charge of the culture, then you can start creating belief systems in the culture. And elites are the people with power. And elites always try to create belief systems. We've talked about that before in this class. Like if you're the king and queen of Europe and you're trying to run a European country, you adopt the dominant ideology of religion and saying that kings and queens are descended from God and you are just a commoner, so you're down here, but we're up here. In fact, the point of the ideology is to justify and explain the underlying social realities. The elites are the ones with power, and elites always have to explain to the people without power why we're up here and you're down there. You're not elite, we're elite. Why? Well, if you ask why are white people the dominant people, why do white people get to have all the wealth and power in America, and why do black people have to be slaves, for example? Well, there had to be an ideology that could justify and explain America. So from 1600 till about 1865, the underlying economic and social reality in America was slavery. Who are the elites of slavery? Well, the slaveholders, the people owning the plantations. If you owned a big, huge plantation and you had 400 slaves working for free for you, picking cotton, you made a lot of money that way. And these people picking cotton had a very miserable existence. And if you were a slaveholder, you probably had to explain to the rest of the country why it's okay for me to have slaves, and it's okay for me to be treating these people this way. America claimed it was a Christian country, right, during slavery. And a lot of people ask, well, is God okay with us like going over to Africa, taking people who don't belong to us, tying them up, chaining them to boats, lying down, hundreds of people lying in their own filth, not being fed, take them to another country, separate the children from the parents, sell the children over here, sell the parents over there, make them work for free. When they won't work for free, whip them. If they still won't work for free, kill them. Is God okay with this? Does God say it's all right to treat people this way? There needed to be an ideology that said this is okay. And what ideology did they come up with? Well, they came up with the ideology of biological inferiority. In other words, they came up with the race concept. This is the time period in American history, 1600 to 1860s, when quote-unquote scientists We're publishing articles to try and explain why it's okay for white people to dominate black people. This race concept was the idea that God himself had created Caucasians as the human race. And God created other subhuman races below that. You have, for example, the Semitic races. Who are the Semitic races? Well, Jewish people, Arabic people. You have Mongoloid races. Who are the Mongoloid races? Well, Asian people, people from Mongolia, but also China and Japan and Korea and India. And you have the Negroid races. This is all fake science. This is what when I'm saying pseudoscience. To justify slavery, quote unquote scientists came up with this whole theory, the race concept, that God himself made one human race and then these subhuman races. And these subhuman races are not as good as the white race. The white race is better. Better morally, better intellectually, better physically. And these other races are inferior. They're not as smart, they can't do things, they're bad, they're evil. I don't know if you accept this race ideology today. A lot of people still do, but many liberal people and scientists have rejected this whole thing. It's that there's nothing inherently better about white-skinned people over dark-skinned people. It's a myth, it's a lie created by white people and by white slaveholders to justify their own slavery, to say it's okay what we're doing. They don't, so when they say, is it okay to whip them? Yeah, they don't feel pain the same way we feel pain. Is it okay to take their children away? Yeah, because they don't love their children the way white people love their children, so it's actually good for them. They like it. What I'm saying is these are socially constructed myths about people to justify and explain a very brutal system, a brutal exploitative system. But eventually that economic system became obsolete because, as we learned in this class, you can use machines to produce things, and that's a much better way of doing things than forcing people to work from sunup to sundown, working for you by hand. So once a new method of planting cotton and picking cotton was invented, the cotton gin, you didn't need slavery anymore. You had a whole new economic and social reality. And so from 1865 till about 1985 in America, we had a different reality. We had industrial capitalism. We had a system where people go and work in factories. And if you go work in a factory or work on a factory farm running machines, they don't care what race you are. They don't care. All they care about is, are you willing to work for the wage? Are you willing to work for what we pay? If you are, we don't care if you're black, white. If you can run the machine and you're black, we'll hire you. If you're white and you can run the machine and you're willing to, we'll hire you. But in industrial capitalism, what you don't want to hear from white people is things like, well, they're black. Why is he getting paid the same as I'm getting paid? He's supposed to be inferior, right? No, now there was a new ideology in America during this period, biological equality. The only thing that matters is hard work. Not that you're inferior and that's why you have to be a slave. What matters now is hard work is what we reward. And if you're willing to work hard, we'll pay you. And if you work harder than the next guy, you'll get paid more than the next guy. That was the new ideology in America that we've had for many years, and many people still believe in it. But Bobo and Smith say we've already passed that ideology by, because now we're living in the globalization era. And our jobs are not staying here in factories, and we're not getting employed to work in factories. Our jobs are being sent to other countries. And so when we ask our elites now, why are you sending our factories, closing them down here and sending them to other places? Are we inferior to the Chinese? Well, not racially, but culturally. They say now it's cultural inferiority that explains why some people are making it in this world and some people aren't. And it's that cultural inferiority, that's the idea of laissez-faire racism. That the government shouldn't help certain groups because some groups just don't have the right culture. And if they would change their culture, maybe they'd get ahead. But we shouldn't be helping them. I'll come back to this laissez-faire ideology and explain it more on Thursday. But it's again a changing definition of what blackness is and whiteness is, and other races. All right, we'll see you later.